Let's go for music. All right. Hello, everyone. It's been an interesting network defined moment, but I believe we are live now. Please let me know that you can hear me. If you can hear me, please drop a comment in the comment section so that we can get started. If you can hear me, if you can see me, please drop a comment in the comment section so that we can get started already. We are behind schedule and I would want us to be as fast as we possibly can. If you can hear me, okay. Thank you very much, Mom. Thank you very much. So, welcome once again. Mighty apologies for the technical delays or network delays. Yeah, I have been switching between networks, just trying to see, what would give us good results, and we are here. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for your patience. It means a lot. All right, so I'll be sharing my screen right about now. Let me know if you can see my screen. I'll let you know when I share it. I've not shared it yet. Okay. So while we are waiting for my screen, please can you just drop a message? Tell us where you are, where you're streaming from, and how expectant you are. Tell us where you are, where you're streaming from, and how expectant you are. Let's see who we have here. Let's see. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Okay, they can hear me, they can see me. Let's see, where are you from? Adamawa. Wow, that was quite the reach. Okay, nice to have you here, Uni, from Adamawa. So let's see, who do we still have? We'll soon be going into the conversation of the day, but let's just do a little, easy enough, get to know who and who is here. I have Uni from Adamawa. Who else is here? Where are you streaming from? I know network has been terrible, but we trust, uh, we trust God that it will work out fine. It is already working out fine. Okay, we are from Anambra. Thank you so much. And okay, so let's get started. We've already burned 22 minutes of our time, and I wouldn't want us to burn extra. So today we are having a conversation on pain and what do I do with this pain. Before we get started, I'll give a full introduction of myself much later after the conversation. But for now, just know that my name is Esther Zoe and I'm the convener of HECT community. You get to know more about what HECT community is and you get to probably know a little more about who Esther Zoe is. So please, you can also inform those in the group that we've started, okay? Inform them that we've started, that they can join in. I hope the network will be able to let them join in. All right. So let's talk about pain. Let's talk about pain. And like I said, I'll need your full participation in this. So let's see. How many of us have experienced pain of any kind? Any kind, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, so that I would know where we are and where we are starting from. How many of us have experienced pain? How many of us know what pain is? Or, you know, we've experienced pain before? Let's just see you in the comment section. Please, like I said, I'll need your participation so that I would be sure that we are on the same page, at least for the beginning sections. Okay, for these first few slides. When I go into the conversation proper, then you may not need a lot of, I may not need a lot of your feedback until later. So, but for now, let's know, have you experienced pain of any kind? How many of us have experienced pain of any kind whatsoever? Okay, I'm yet to see responses. I'm yet to see responses. Okay, okay. All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much. And okay, so I'm just going to err on the side of what's the word now? I'm going to err on the side of leverage, of giving us leverage, and I'm going to just continue because I know we are not much on the stream, and I really, really do not want to take more than I have stipulated to take in this meeting. Okay, so most of us, if you have functional nervous systems, most of us have experienced pain of some kind. Okay, you've experienced physical pain, you've bumped your head on the wall, you've fallen down and scraped your knees, you have had probably a flame burn. So say flame from the fire, raw fire, you've had probably hot water pour on you. So you sort of have an understanding of what pain looks like, what it should look like, or what it does look like in the physical form. We've also had experiences of pain like stomach ulcers, some of us, not everybody. You've had maybe stomach ulcer, you've had probably a heartburn. So these are different kinds of painful experiences and physical pain. And some of us have also experienced some emotional pains like the pain of a heartbreak and some other kind of pain, pain of probably the loss of a loved one. And so we all have an understanding, at least to some extent, what pain looks like. And so today we are going to delve a little bit more and niche a little more on a particular kind of pain. But let's progress, and I'll do my best not to jump my slides. The next question here was, what is pain in your own understanding? I would have loved to have us hear our definition of pain, whether dictionary definition or personal experience definition. Is there someone who can just give us a quick definition of what you feel pain is in your own understanding? What's pain looks like? Okay, so I don't know if anybody can quickly help us with that before we progress. Help us define pain in your own understanding. There is nobody's getting an A for it. It's just to help us know what you know about pain. It's always good to start from where you are and progress so that I don't talk over your head and I don't talk beneath where you are. So if you are just joining in, please do well to tell us where you are watching from so that we can have a wonderful. Oh, I didn't even see Rachel from Lagos. Welcome, Rachel. Okay, so okay, definition of pain. I'm still waiting, but like I said, I don't want to kill much of our time, and I know network is not being very friendly. So we just speed things up, hopeful that by the time we really settle into the conversation and settle into what I'm offering to you, we would be better able to understand and appreciate this concept of pain. And I would have really, who likes pain? This one, please, I need a response. I don't mind spending an extra 5 minutes here. I just need a response. Who likes pain? Okay, I mind spending 5 minutes extra. But come on, who likes pain? Who likes pain? Who likes that nauseous feeling, that painful feeling? Who likes it? I don't mean who likes inflicting others with pain. No, I mean who likes pain as a person. You just like to be in pain. Who is that? Do we have someone here like that? There are people who do not feel pain. Okay, they are they for some reasons, maybe there are nervous issues. Okay, so we have pain is an unpleasant experience associated with actual tissue damage or potential injury. I love that definition, and it's very closely linked to the definition I have, which we'll be going into shortly. And we have someone say, I don't like pain. Okay, the average person does not like pain. Most people do not like pain. Naturally, we tend to pull away from pain and anything that hurts us. Uh, and it makes me to wonder, okay, we don't have the time, but I would have asked, why don't you like pain? Nevertheless, does it occur to you that pain could be a good thing? Okay, they say pain is good somehow for the body because it can prevent further damage. Okay, it's good though, but it's not like I like it. Oh, beautiful. Yes, pain is good. I like that someone understands that pain is good, but we don't like pain. And it's beautiful that we know this. So I'm going to throw a little more light into that. Let's move on to the next slide. And like I said, we had a definition closely linked to what I had, and that's that pain, according to the International Association for the Study of Pain, it's an unpleasant sensory or emotional experience that is usually associated with actual or potential tissue damage, actual or potential injury. I'm going to throw a little more light into the keywords I highlighted to give us better understanding. Okay. Now, pain is unpleasant. It could be a sensory emotion. When I asked how many of us have experienced physical pain, we had some people say, okay, some of us have experienced physical pain and we do not like it. We don't like it because it's unpleasant, right? And it could also be an emotional experience. It is often an emotional experience, which is why many times you feel bad, let's use the word bad, or sad, or upset. Sometimes you cry when you have pain because, in as much as there was a damage to, let's say, your body, your tissues, it also released certain kind of hormones, certain kind of chemicals in the brain that spurred a certain kind of unpleasant feeling, unpleasant emotional feeling. And so that's why pain, whether physical or not, always goes with an emotional experience. Okay, and another thing worthy of note in the definition is that it is associated with actual or potential tissue damage. This is key. So you would feel pain either when there is a damage going on, or there is a damage about to go on. And this is very pivotal to what we are talking about. And I would love for you to keep it at the back of your mind as we progress. You would feel pain whether there is an actual damage, say you break your leg or you scrape your knees or whatever, or a potential tissue damage. Say, for example, if you put your hand over maybe under a hot plate or over fire, you would see that you begin to feel some painful sensation. The damage has not occurred, but if you remain there, it is going to occur. This is very important. And that leads us to our next conversation on appreciating the purpose of pain. Appreciating the purpose of pain. Please, if you have questions, feel free to drop your questions. I will take note of them and see how to come back to them, or just note them somewhere so that when it's time for questions, we or along the way, if you have any questions, just drop it and we we would address it. Okay. I said that there is purpose in the pain. As we've said, pain teaches us whether there is actual or potential tissue damage going on. Now, I love to use two examples when I talk about pain, when I talk about the benefits of pain or the purpose of pain. And the example, one of the examples I like to use is with diabetes neuropathy. I don't know how many of us have medical backgrounds, but I'm just going to pull it down as layman level as possible. So, in layman conversation, diabetic neuropathy simply means damage to the blood, to the nerves. Okay, so it simply means that there is damage to the nerves. Diabetes, on the other hand, of course, most of us should know what it is. Most of us should have heard of that. Has to do with elevated blood glucose, levels of blood glucose. Now, diabetic neuropathy tells us that this elevated blood glucose, for so many reasons, and in so many in a series of processes that I will not be able to talk about in this particular meeting, leads to a certain experience or a certain reality whereby the elevated blood glucose can begin to damage small blood vessels that supply the nerves. And you want to understand why. Because the blood glucose is not supposed to be at elevated levels in the blood. So when it is much, it's like you're having, let's use a clogged pipe to explain this. I mean, some of us might have experienced a clogged pipe where debris clogs the pipe, okay? And so it prevents water from flowing. So take that pipe as your blood vessel, take the debris as the excess blood glucose, and take the water or whatever is supposed to pass through it as blood, right? So now with neuropathy, the blood vessels, the small ones, not the major ones most times, it's usually the small ones, are clogged. And so they cannot, the ones especially supplying your nerves, so they cannot supply blood to the nerves. And so that nerve eventually ceases to function. And what happens is that it ceases to function, it's not receiving blood, it's not receiving nutrients, it's not receiving what it needs to thrive. And so it ceases to function. Sometimes it gets damaged or it can disappear. And what this leads to is that these nerves, which are naturally supposed to help us know, feel, okay, tell us what's happening with respect to our senses, help us to see, to feel, to smell, to see how something looks like. These nerves are no longer functional. They can no longer function. And in diabetic neuropathy, which is well, let me not say it's common, but which happens with diabetic patients, you begin to see it manifest at their extremities, so their hands, their feet, meaning they lose sensation. They can no longer, they don't know when. It starts with the feet usually. Many times they are not, don't feel where they are stepping on. They can injure themselves and not know. They can step on a nail and not know. Why? Because the nerves have lost sensation. And that is what happens when pain is no longer there. If you step on a nail, you would know you stepped on a nail. What would you do? You quickly remove, your reflexes will go into work. So you remove your leg, you treat the injury, and you'll be more cautious. But when you don't feel the sensation of pain, when those nerves are damaged, there is no sensation of pain. You can't handle the situation the way you should. I don't know how many of us are with me now. You can't handle the situation the way you should. And so what happens? That nail injury, for example, begins to fester, begins to grow, begins to even decay. And before you know it, you start hearing conversation of, oh, we need to amputate, we need to amputate, we need to amputate. And so that's why pain is beautiful. As unpleasant as it is beautiful. It has purpose. Another example I like to talk about is osteoarthritis. And osteoarthritis is usually when it happens in osteoarthritis, we only know it's arthritis, okay? And it's common in the weight bearing joints of our body. So weight bearing joints, you're looking at your neck, you're looking at your waist, your hip, your knee, and all that. And for what some reasons I will not go into because it's outside the scope of our conversation this morning. For whatever reasons, the joint, because the joint is where two bones meet, right? I hope you can see my hand. So let's assume that this is a joint. There is usually a protective film across the joints that makes it move very smoothly. So you can bend down, you can stand up, you can flex your arm, you can do whatever you want to do. There is just so much, there's just fluidity between the two bones, right? That's the joint. Now, when osteoarthritis happens, that protective film is eroded for several reasons. So what happens is there is no the friction, there's no friction, there's no more smoothness of activity of events taking place. And what does this lead to? Usually so many reasons, so many things, but one key thing is pain. Okay, we are back to pain. Now, why do I like using osteoarthritis when talking about pain? Because of the way many of us handle it when we have it. Okay, most of us are young, so maybe not us, maybe our mothers, our fathers, and all. And how do we handle it? We take drugs, right? Drugs to numb the pain. Sadly, remember I told you there's a protective film covering it that makes this movement smooth and effortless. When you take drugs to numb the pain, it does numb the pain, but it doesn't stop the damage that is going on. And so because it doesn't stop the damage going on, the damage keeps going on. And when the damage proceeds for a little while, the pain resurfaces, and then you take more drugs, it numbs the pain. You are not addressing the issue. You are just quelling the pain. You're just numbing the pain. You're just trying to silence it because you don't like the pain. But you're not addressing the issue. And so at the end of the day, a time comes, I'm a physical therapist, a time comes when nothing, no drug can can stop the pain. And so what happens? Sometimes they bundle themselves to the physical therapist who at that time can do little or nothing. Sometimes it has gotten so bad, the only solution is a surgical operation to replace the knee or to replace some parts of the joint, whatever it is, depending on how severe it has grown. Now, why did I bring up these two conversations? It's to help us on the while physical pain. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So why did I bring it up? It's to help us know that although physical pain gives us a clue that something is happening, it is not enough. In fact, it is not encouraged to just want to numb the pain. As we progress, would see how this applies into what we are talking about. It's not enough to just want to numb the pain. It's not enough to not desire pain. So there is a part of people who, like the diabetic neuropathy patient, doesn't even feel pain and so doesn't even know there is damage going on, or doesn't recognize the pain and doesn't know there's damage going on. And then there is the one who sees the pain, feels the pain, experiences the pain, hates the pain, and looks for a solution. Sadly, the solution is to numb the pain rather than to take care of what the issue is. And that's why I say the purpose of pain is not for you to settle into the damage that is going on. It's not for you to numb it and say, no, I don't want to feel this painful experience. I want to be happy. It's for you to address the situation. And I greatly desirous that at the end of this conversation, we will be steps closer to addressing our pains. Let's proceed. This brings me to the conversation of soul wounds and trauma. Now, before some of us get all edgy, because I've come across some people, the word trauma is like a taboo word. Don't talk about it. Please, before you get there, just hear me out, okay? Before you get there, hear me out. Trauma is a very simple English word, medical term that means injury. So if you break your finger, it's trauma, physical trauma. You bang your head on something, it's trauma. Someone blows you on the face, they call it in medical term blunt force trauma. Trauma simply means injury. So get comfortable with the word. Don't see it as this thing they want to use to label me. They want to use to say I'm this or I'm that, or I'm not fine, I'm mentally insane. No, 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 no. Nobody says you're mentally insane because you go to a hospital and tell them I'm having stomach ache. Nobody says that. There's a problem with the stomach which needs to be taken care of. So don't see trauma, don't see the word trauma as this taboo word that is designated to a set of people who are mentally ill, who are neurotic, who are a chaos to the society. No, trauma is injury. It's as simple as that. And trauma to the soul. Now we are niched down to the soul because that's what we're talking about today. Not physical trauma, but the soulical trauma. Trauma to the soul or injury to the soul is worth paying attention to. Why? Because the activities of the soul practically forms our entire existence on a very practical basis. On a very practical basis. And that's why I went on to try to explain or help you understand how that works. So the soul comprises of the emotions, which I call the heart. Some schools of thoughts might not call it the heart. The Bible might also maybe not call it the heart, but I'm calling it the heart for the purpose of this conversation. But just know that it is your emotions, right? So the soul component contains the emotions, the thoughts, and the will. The emotions, the thoughts, and the will. Now, this soul component is more like a bridge between the spirit and the body. If you are a Bible student of any degree of understanding, double back to Genesis chapter 2, you see that in Genesis 1, God created a spirit man. In Genesis 2, he formed a body, and the scripture said, as he breathed the spirit man into the body, a third component erupted called the soul. And so the soul is, let's not say it's a mediator, but it's just the middleman between spirit and body. And that is why human beings are the only creations that have a soul. Human beings are the only creations that have a soul. Some people might argue otherwise and say, oh, the dogs have a soul, animals have a soul. Well, according to my scriptures, human beings are the only ones that have a soul. They have the spirit breathed, the breath of the spirit on the physical body, and the scripture says man became a living soul, a living being. Now, this being comprises or has the emotions, the thoughts, and the will. I call the emotions the seat of intuitive release. Intuitive and release. I would break it down. I'm checking my time so I don't delay us too much on this, but this is important. This is integral to your understanding and your progress. Okay, so I call the emotions the seat of intuitive release, meaning that number one is it's intuitive, meaning you do not think about it. You don't necessarily you do not necessarily think about being angry before you are angry. If something happens that just doesn't sit well, you get angry, right? You do not necessarily decide that, oh, okay, it's time to feel ashamed. No, you don't do that. Something happens and shame just comes upon me. Okay, so it's intuitive release. It's why I call it a release. It's an expression of what's going on your inside. It's an expression of the state of your soul, of the state of your soul. That's why it's called a release, an intuitive release. Volition or the will is what I call the seat of independent reaction. Independent, meaning that you choose what you do. Other people might influence it, other situations might influence it, but at the end of the day, you ultimately choose how you act, what you do. Okay? I'm going to give a personal example. My husband is on this call. Shout out to him. I am going to give an example that happened yesterday. Please, if you are with me, just like let me know. Let me see the comments, the chat board, so that I'll know that I'm not talking to myself. Okay. So I'm going to give a personal example on this. So just last night, something happened and we had a little clash. When I mean clash, I'm not talking of anything chaotic, just a little misunderstanding and disagreement last night. And so after we talked, because we usually don't go to bed without airing out whatever it is that is the issue and try to resolve it. So after we talked and he shared his point of view, telling me how whatever happened and ultimately how I was wrong in what I did, what I said. And I apologized, right? I said, okay, I was still a bit upset because originally, before we entered the conversation, I felt I knew I did wrong, but I felt the way he responded was not the way he should respond. So I was upset, right? So I apologized and I said, okay, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for doing that, I'm sorry for doing that, I'm sorry for doing that. And I sat down there waiting to hear him say maybe it's okay or whatever. And probably some 20, 30 seconds passed without him saying anything. At that point in time, I had two options. I had the option to, because I wanted to go and do the dishes, right? I had the option to say, well, I've apologized. I'm going to do my dishes, you know. And I also had the option to go to where he was because he was sort of on the bed and I was on a chair. Go to where he was, rub his back and say, okay, babe, I'm sorry now, or, I'm sorry, that kind of thing. And not before, I would say, well, I've apologized. However you want to handle it's your problem. And then I would go into the kitchen and do my thing, knowing fully well that that action alone would just keep festering the injury that's already taken place. But I decided to take the other approach, which is not natural to me. I'll explain why it is not natural to me. I'm not the I'm not the cutie person. I don't do that. I'm not that person that is all um what's the word now? What's the word? Who can help me with the word? I'm not that person who is naturally soft. Let's just use that word. Okay. So I do not naturally just go and fall on somebody's body and say, yeah, now sorry now, sorry now. No, I would rather stay where I am, tell you sorry, accept it, and let's move on than to try to pet and be, and touch and say, okay, sorry, sorry, sorry. That's not that it doesn't come to me naturally. There are people it does come to naturally. It doesn't come to me naturally. So the natural thing for me to do would have been to just go to the kitchen and do my dishes. After all, it's already 11 o'clock. I need to do my dishes. I still need to do this. I need to do that. I need to sleep and be refreshed and wake up in time for this conversation. Makes sense to me. However, I willed a different response. I willed a different reaction. And that is what we are talking about. It is that seat of independent reaction. So, how you eventually choose to respond, whether it is sponsored by someone's action or inaction, whether it's sponsored by your thought, whatever it is, it's still you who chooses to do it. So it's an independent reaction to whatever it is you have chosen to do. I chose to have this meeting. Yes, I was inspired. The Lord gave me an assignment and all that. But I could have still said, Lord, I don't think I have that kind of time now. I have other things I'm doing. How about we move it to next year? I could have done it, but I still chose. It's still my independent will to do. Okay, and that's one thing God did not take from us, our will. He would inspire you with His will. It's left for you to take His will. If you don't want to take it, He will not force you, but it only widens the gap of relationship. Okay, that's not why we are here. So the next one is the mind, which is the seat of interpretation. And I call it the seat of interpretation because the mind has the conscious, the subconscious, and even the unconscious part of its existence, right? So, but I call it the seat of interpretation because it is what practically tells you what you believe. Your thought process, your thought patterns, how you see life, your belief systems, everything is as the mind has interpreted it for you. And so, if the mind interprets that someone did not greet you, and so the person is beefing you, you are very likely to release the emotion of anger, and you are very likely to begin to act in a certain way because your mind has interpreted somebody's not greeting you as being beef with you, whereas the person might probably not even have seen you. I've had a lot of short-sighted friends who, or people with eye defect, who at that point in time did not put on their glasses, and they complain that people think, people always chat them up and say, I was greeting you the other day, you didn't say anything. And they're like, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Okay, so it's all what the mind interprets. It is all what the mind interprets. And that is why it's important that the soul and the trauma that happens to the soul is is giving great attention. Because if you do not attend to it the way it should, it would practically dictate your life. In fact, it practically dictates your life in the subtle ways, in the obvious ways. It impacts how you understand, how you view life. It impacts even your understanding of scripture. It impacts how you relate with God. There are some people who see God as one angry person always looking for who to annoy and who doesn't like your good. And it's simply a concept, it's simply a function of how their mind is operating. Are you still with me? Are you still with me? Let me know you are still with me. Drop a comment in the comment section. Buzz your peeps on the group. Tell them we have started though. We have started. It takes less discipline to attend the live session than to watch a replay. Replays will be available, but it takes more discipline to catch a replay. So tell them that we are on. They should join in as much as they can, and we will progress. And so, as I'm saying, it's important that we pay attention to our souls. Pay attention to your soul. Always ask yourself, why do I feel the way I feel? Why do I respond in this way? What am I predominantly thinking about? I had to go through this particular one some either days or weeks back. And I saw that my predominant thought about a certain thing has influenced why I see the kind of results I see in that area. And I had to say, Lord, help me to change the way I think about this thing. You need to ask yourself, why do I really think this way? Why do I really think this way? Pay attention. What informs my decision? Why do I what actually spurs me to do the things I do? Are they coming from a place of conditioning? Are they coming from a place of conviction? Are they coming from a place of environmental influence? What really informs my decisions and the things that I do? This is key to understand. And it's important that as we pay attention to our souls, we understand that there are so many things that can injure your soul. Remember, I said that trauma is simply injury. I would keep hitting on this conversation, on this particular thing as we progress. Trauma is simply injury. Don't just see trauma as, oh, I was not raped as a child, so I'm good. Or, oh, my parents did not divorce, so I'm fine. No, trauma simply means injury. And there are numerous things that can injure your soul, numerous things that can create wounds in your heart. I've talked about heartbreak. People, when you have a heartbreak, many times it makes you not to, for some people, not to believe in love again. Oh, after I did everything I did for him, love is a scam. You hear conversations like that. The loss of a loved one can wound your soul. See, as long as we remain on earth, wounds to the soul will continue to happen. It will continue to happen. People you trust and believe will act in a certain way that you will make you to begin to wonder, I thought this person had my back. Trauma to the soul will continue to happen. I mean, look at the economic decline in one status. Before you were middle class, now you are poor because of the regime of government we are in. It messes up with your soul. It's trauma to your soul. Okay? But so all these things are bound to happen to injure your soul. It's bound to happen. The same way you are bound to have injury on your body. I have a beautiful 5 month old baby. I was looking at her body the other day. Was I bathing her or something? And I saw some, boil like things on her body. I saw her face was full of heat rashes because it's been really hot. And I just felt, I was about to feel sad, like, oh, my baby's tender skin. And it just occurred to me that, man, you're on earth. You cannot avoid, you cannot run away from the corruption. This earth is corrupt. You cannot run away from the corruption, be it a skin issue, a physical issue, or an emotional trauma. You can't run away from it. What you can do is what we are going to talk about. Okay, so while we would always, as long as our soul is in existence, as long as we have feelings, we think, and we make decisions, we would always have traumas. However, I personally believe that the extent or the impact of every kind of trauma you can think of, that every kind of soul trauma now, soul wound you can think of, the extent of it, the gravity of it, the impact of it is largely situated in a certain kind of trauma. And that kind of trauma, I believe, is the foundation of every other trauma, is what we call childhood trauma. Yes. I'll give an instance of this using heartbreak. Now, someone who grew up in a family of love would experience a heartbreak, mourn over it, probably talk to their mom or whoever, and is more likely to get over it and still believe in love than somebody who came from a family where love was never in the equation, both in action and in words, where everything was a competition. That person would have a heartbreak, probably have nobody to talk to, or the only person they can talk to is someone who cannot help them. and they end up no longer believing in love. And so their own tangent of relationship is to use people. The same heartbreak, different gravities, different associations, different addresses. That's the way it is addressed. Why? Something that had to do with the foundation, which is what? Childhood trauma. Childhood trauma. Are you all still with me? Before I progress, how many of us have heard of the word childhood trauma? I know it's not common, but I want to do some little community engagement here. If you've heard of the word childhood trauma, please just say I have in the comment section before we proceed. Sorry. I don't know why I'm touching my screen up and down. The laptop I'm using is a touch screen, and so wherever whenever my hand scrapes on the whenever my hand scrapes on the screen, I'll just touch something. Okay, so please, I want to know how many of us have heard of the word childhood trauma. Okay, we have someone who has heard of it. Someone has heard of it. Someone has heard of it. Sorry, I'm just trying to see what's going on. Please do join in. Tell people, because we are entering the midst of this conversation now. Like we're entering the midst of this conversation now. Okay. Childhood trauma. I hope you heard the part where I said that it's, let me not say it is a source. It's not the source of every trauma, but it is what helps you, it's what informs how you handle every other trauma. Okay, beautiful. A lot of people have heard of it. And so let's move into the definition of terms. Childhood trauma. Childhood trauma is usually defined as a scary, dangerous, violent, or life threatening event that happens to a child 0 to 18 years of age. 0 to 18. Now, somebody may say, but 18 is not a child, as it were, or I've thought of it. I've thought, was it not society that pegged childhood at 18? So, besides or before society pegged childhood at 18, is an 18-year-old person really a child? And all, I've had that conversation, I've thought about it. And what I eventually came to understand is that the trauma is just like stroke. If you, I'm sorry, not stroke, cerebral palsy. Okay, if you've not heard of it, you can Google it later. Cerebral palsy, it's damage to developing brain of the child, and it's usually pegged from pre-birth, that's prenatal when the child is still forming in the womb, to age 4. So it doesn't mean that 0 to 4 is where childhood stops, right? It only means that there is a certain thing that happens within that period of time that makes any damage that happens to the brain to be called cerebral palsy. It's the same thing with my understanding of childhood. 0 to 18 are critical formative years, very critical formative years that I won't really go into all what is formed and everything, but it's very critically formative. And in fact, if not for, let me just say, societal construct, the brain of a person is fully developed at age 24. So if you are under 24 year, you don't have a fully developed brain yet, but you are getting there. Okay. Oh, precious Lord. So let's go back to what we were talking about. I said that trauma, childhood trauma, is usually defined as a scary, dangerous, violent, life threatening event that happens to a child. But here's the mind boggling part of it. Do you know that not all childhood traumas are necessarily scary, dangerous, violent, or life threatening? Not all events that traumatizes a child are necessarily scary or dangerous or violent. Okay? At least not to you as the adult. Now, many of us, the most of us have parents who the average parent is a good parent. The average parent does not want to harm their child. The average parent is not planning to be wicked or planning to traumatize their child. So when we are talking scary, dangerous, violent, I don't want you to see it as it only happens to parents with parents who are terrible, psychotic, psychopaths, sociopaths. No, 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 no. It's not that. Here's the twister. These events, this dangerous, scary, violent, life-threatening, is not as perceived as you, the adult. It is as perceived as the child. Do you understand what that means? It means that an event can happen, may not be anything major, but the child perceives it as life threatening, and that becomes a point of trauma. That becomes a point of trauma. It is as the child perceives it, which is where the twist is. This is why it's tricky. This is why it is tricky. You see, let's go into it. Let's sit into it now. The primary need of a child is acceptance and safety. Anything that tampers with a child's sense of being accepted or being safe is perceived and defined as being dangerous, violent, life threatening, blah, blah, blah. A child, let's use a typical example, may come from a home where maybe the parents have, say, 7 children, they can't take care of the 7 children. They now say, okay, you go and stay with your auntie. You go and stay with your auntie, she'll take care of you. See, that auntie may be the nicest person on earth, but for whatever reason, if that child feels like safety has just been taken away from me, that's particularly very unintended act of care and concern would traumatize the child. I don't mean that the auntie is wicked and beat. No, the auntie might send you to the best schools, do everything nice for you. But if the child perceives I was taken away from home, I was disconnected with my parents and siblings, the child perceives it as danger, as life threatening. It will traumatize the child. That is the tricky part of childhood trauma. And that's why I had to start by saying most parents are good people. They don't want to harm you. The little unintentional things they do many times is what causes the problem. The child's brain, the child, okay, especially I can't pin an age to it, but the formative, the very early years of the child's life. So let's say 0 to 10. Okay, 10 is a pivotal age. So let's say 0 to 10. The early part of a child's life, the child has a primary need of acceptance and of safety. And as the child relates with the people around them, parents, caregivers, church people, you name it, school, colleagues, whatever begins to happen there, as the child is relating, the brain is forming. Oh, I hope you understand that the brain is what is interpreting, giving interpretation. The brain and the mind have a connection that even science have agreed to. So as the brain is taking information from the environment, it's feeding the mind. The mind is interpreting it in whatever way the mind wants to interpret it, and it is instructing the child many times for life. Many times it becomes an unconscious conditioning. Okay, so as the child interacts with people, the brain is decoding what's happening, what's happening, what's happening. The brain, I wrote here, the brain works to keep you safe. Many of you who procrastinate, because your brain is telling you that to do this work now is not safe, is a threat to our peace. And so the brain would wire you to just, we'll do it later, we'll do it later, we'll do it later. We'll do it later, we'll do it later, we'll do it later. The brain is trying to keep you safe. And that's like one way to beat procrastination is to change your thinking. I'm giving you something on this. You have to wire me funds because this is a tip, this is a pro tip that has nothing to do with our conversation here. So try it and beat procrastination and come back and thank me. The brain, back to our conversation, attempts to keep you safe. That's the work of the brain. From childhood, even up till now, anything the brain senses as an attack, it will resist. And so, whatever the brain decodes and feeds to the mind, and however the mind interprets it, becomes what happens. Okay? It becomes what happens. Now, how does the brain even pick this decoding, these signals from environment, from people, and everything? When anything happens, the brain is always, especially at that developmental phase of the child's life, okay? Hope you are still with me. Beautiful. So, especially at the developmental portion of the child's life, the brain is learning. The brain is learning. What's this new thing happening? The brain is learning. It's picking signals. It's picking chemical release. That when I mean chemical release, I'm talking about the neurotransmitters, the hormones that the brain releases with actions that take place. And so when it picks signals, for example, it picks a certain perfume or a certain color or a certain voice pitch or a certain person, it's it matches it with the chemical hormones, the chemicals being released, okay, and it synchronizes it together, feeds it to the mind. The mind gives it an interpretation. It logs it in the brain. It's like logged, stamped. So when next this happens, this is what will happen, and this is what is happening. So let's break it down. If a child, or yeah, a child, maybe a 10-year-old child, got raped by a big man wearing red, the rape incident already has released a lot of um, chemical hormones that would probably be interpreted as anger, as shame, as guilt, as whatever. Okay. The brain would link big man on red with anger or shame or guilt, whatever it is that it finally interpreted it. So let's just take let's take anger, for example. And so you are now wondering why the child grows up, gets married to a lovely man, and the day the man wears red, the day that man wears red, she doesn't know why she just gets angry for everything he does. He's like, why are you picking on me? And she can't even understand why she's picking on him. But the brain has linked big man on red with anger. And so whenever that happens, whenever that external stimulation takes place, the internal stimulation would naturally respond, or let's use the word react. This is what happens more times than ever. It may not necessarily be a big red man. Have you noticed that there are some, and maybe not you, I'm in a, I'm in a parenting, I'm in a parenting group, and sometimes we have conversations, gist and all. And at a particular time, we had a seminar or a training, okay, a training on this trauma thing. Was it trauma? A training on something related to this. And you see, I saw someone's comment. She says, "Oh, now I understand why I don't like egusi soup. Egusi soup reminds me of my late mom. That was her favorite food to cook. And since she passed away when I was tender, I just began to hate egusi soup. Are you seeing how very subtle these things are? And that's why I said, don't see trauma just as, oh, I was not raped. They did not, I was not beaten to stoop on a child. No, 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 no. It's injury to your soul. Injury to your soul. Okay, we've moved to source of trauma. Okay, let's go back. Let me just talk a little bit about what we have going on here. So I said here on the slide that it's while childhood trauma is okay, while childhood trauma is of essence is that number one, it takes place before these things are happening before the rational thinking has taken form. Now, like I said to you before, the brain of a child or the brain of a human being is fully formed at age 24. And so, from 0 to 18, which is the focus we have here, the brain is still forming. The rational thinking part of the brain, the cerebral cortex part of the brain, is not fully developed. And so, for that child, that baby coming up, okay, everything that happens around them is addressed on an emotional basis. They address everything with emotions because that part comes fully formed. Emotions come fully formed, but rationality is not formed, it's still forming. So they cannot understand. They don't understand that mommy loves me, mommy cannot take care of me. That's why she sent me to live with auntie. They don't understand it. What they see is I must be the bad child, that I am the one that is sent, that I'm the one that they decided to send to auntie. That is what the brain is interpreting. That's what the brain interprets. It can be scary sometimes. But there is a way out. So I don't want you to get scared and say, hey Jesus, what will I do? No, 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 don't worry. What's to do? We'll come to it. But I'm just trying to let you understand why these things happen the way they do. The brain of the child is not the rationality, the rational thinking part of the child's brain is not fully formed. And so they don't put the rational thinking to what is happening. As long as they're concerned, I did something wrong. A child can forgive, a child will never see anything wrong with their abusive father. They will see everything wrong with themselves who is being abusive. You see a father beating up the child every time, every time, every time in a very terrible manner, and the child is thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me. Maybe if I do this, maybe remember the child is looking for acceptance, and that beating means I am not accepted. It means I am not upset. So there must have to do something or be something or say something to become accepted. It never ever judges the parent. That's why even till today, when you tell people your parents traumatized, they say never, don't say anything about our parents. Don't you? That is dishonoring to your parents. I'm sorry. Acknowledging the truth is not dishonor. Realizing that out of ignorance and out of the little our parents knew, I honor our parents. They did the best they knew to do. But it doesn't remove the fact that certain things they did or didn't do injured us. It doesn't remove that fact. Acknowledging it is the first step to healing. Acknowledging it does not mean that you are now holding grudges against your parents. No. Or you are now seeing them as evil. No. It simply means this is where my problem is coming from. So if I must address it, I have to go back to this. One, I recently, let's not go into I don't want to talk about myself too much. I began my personal trauma healing journey in 2019. So it's been a while. I've greatly improved, but there's still much to improve on. And one thing I don't lie to myself is to say my parents did it all right. They did not. They did the best they could. the best they knew to do. If they knew better, they would do better. Now that I'm an adult, it's my time to do start from where they stopped, manage myself, and then make sure that I don't rub off that trauma on my children. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Too far ahead of myself. Okay. So it's traumatic because it takes place before rational thinking has taken form. It is usually the first set of inputs that the brain has to run with as a prototype. Remember, I said the brain takes external stimulus or stimuli, takes internal one, merges it together, sends it to the mind. The mind does some forming, whatever, interprets it in any way, and then, bam, there is a stamp. It's like save to recall, save to recall. So whenever the stimulus happens, the reaction must happen. It's safe to recall. And many times it forms our subconscious wiring, subconsciously. And that's why I gave the example of a woman who was raped as a child, sees her husband on red. Her husband is big, so he wears red that day. And she doesn't know why she's just venomous towards him. She's just venomous towards him that day. And the day he's not on red, every other time is happy. He'll be like, were you the one who was doing this thing to me yesterday? And she doesn't even know why. Let's move, please, because we are really running out of time. I plan to just spend our stops, and network took about 22 minutes of our time. So there's a lot to catch up on. Sources of childhood trauma. I've hinted a little bit about this here and there. But in my understanding, in my observation, I've seen three broad sources of trauma. So we have the natural causes, the nature causes, and this could include terminal illnesses. So, in as much as you may not have, you might have had it all good as a child, but you see people who have terminal illnesses, long-standing illnesses, deformities, somehow it wrecks their soul, it injures their soul. Why? Because of so many reasons. Now, I have a friend who is a seeker, and some months back, I put out a sort of questionnaire to some of my friends, just to have an insight into what's happening with relation to trauma and all that. And one of the questions I asked was, "What do you see is what do you, what's the what's the word? How do I put it now? What do you see as the side effects? Let's use the word of this thing. So this thing that happened to you, how is it affecting you now?" And one of the things she said was that it has made her dependent. It has made her not to think she can do anything on her own, because being a sickler, she always depended on people. This is among the many other scars, but she always depended on people. And so even now she's a grown-up adult, way over 30 years of age, she still feels that dependency. She still feels she cannot progress, or she can't do things, she can't get things done if she doesn't include other people. Is it her fault? No, it's the sickness, it's the illness. Okay? Nurture is the next reason. This is where most of what they call adverse childhood experiences come in. So you're looking at abuse, you're looking at neglect, you're looking at marital issues, marital violence among parents, you're looking at divorce conditions, you're looking at even housing someone who's mentally ill or someone who was suicidal. We are looking at an addicted parent, addicted to work or addicted to drugs, addicted to another substance, addicted to sex, whatever, promiscuity, and all falls under this nurture, because it forms how you are going to perceive love and acceptance and safety. Okay. And lastly, we have environmental causes, which includes war, natural disasters, imprisonment. Maybe you had a family member, a close family member, say a brother or a father or mother imprisoned, terrorism and all that, it also, you can imagine what the Chibok girls, if you're Nigerian, you're familiar with Chibok girls, you can imagine what trauma has done to them. Okay, now I included here that it's difficult for a one-off event to ever be traumatic, except if it's really huge, like rape or major accidents that cause maybe a dislocation or a deformity. Aside such really grave events, it's difficult that a one-off event would cause trauma. Usually it's repeated, it's repeated, it's repeated, it is repeated. And it is that repetition that begins to cause the brain to say, okay, like we agreed, this is the response, this is the stimuli, this is the feedback, and this is a law. It becomes a law. This just made me remember what Apostle Paul said about the law of the flesh. He said there's a law at work in me. Okay. So, as I said, it's never usually a one-off issue. Okay. So I'm coming trying to check something. Okay. It's usually a repetition, a repetition, a repetition. And that is why, as parents, can you still hear me? Please, can you still hear me? I think I'm having a network issue. Can anyone still hear me? Okay. I think I was off for a while. I'm not certain. I think I was off for a while. But let's proceed. Okay. Let us proceed. Having considered the different sources, now I want us to try, from my many definitions, many examples, many instances, I want you to begin to try to diagnose what a soul pain can look like. I've written some here, some crazy stuff here, but I want it's just a snippet to help you to really self-diagnose and say, okay, what's going on? That's why I said you have to take care of your soul. You have to keep asking yourself these questions. So let's look at some of them. Constantly attracting never do wells as romantic partners because of the savior complex. So now this is typical when you have parents who were not there for you. When I mean being there for you, they were not emotionally available for you. And many times they demanded or needed you to even be the one giving them emotional support. The problem with that is that a child, as a the problem with that is at that phase of life, you are not equipped to do all these things. You are not. You're not equipped to help your parents. You are still trying to understand what's happening around you. You are still trying to discern how to navigate life. You need your parents to teach you how to navigate life. So when they begin to demand it of you, it's already traumatic. Now it puts you in this savior complex where you feel, okay, I need to save them. For example, see an alcoholic father or a psychotic mom. Probably she had she's bipolar or something. And so I read the story of a family, very terrible stuff. The father would encounter something outside, maybe something didn't go the way he wanted it to go. Then he would come home and be crying. The father of the house will come back home, be really, crying severely. The mother couldn't deal with that, so she just goes to her room. What is left? The daughter steps in to begin to be the one to tend daddy. Daddy, don't cry again. Daddy, don't cry again. You know, she constantly feels, what can I do so that daddy doesn't cry? You think it's simple. You think it's not. Until she grows up and she begins to see that all her relationships, she constantly kept attracting people who cannot take care of themselves. So you see people who are wasters. When I mean wasters, I mean they can't keep a job, they get money, they squander it. Nothing, they're not responsible. That's the word I was looking for. She keeps attracting irresponsible people. Why? She had a father who was irresponsible with his emotions, and she had to be the one to take care of him. And what did that do? It gave her the savior complex. I can save him. If only I do something, daddy will be fine. If only I do something, daddy will not have to go through, will not have to be crying. But baby girl, you could do nothing. There was nothing in this life you would have done for daddy not to. Daddy was irresponsible. She doesn't know that. Instead, she grows up with the savior complex and continually attracts men who are irresponsible. And so you see her always being the one feeding them, always being the one taking care of their needs, always being the one looking for jobs for them. She'll find a job for them. After 2 weeks, the man will quit. She'll look for another job for him. Irresponsibility. Now, someone may say, this girl, can't you see responsibility? Man? She cannot. She doesn't have a template of responsibility to see. She she cannot. It's not like she does not want to. It's the wiring. She can't. Except she begins to heal. She cannot. Many of the things we are fighting with knowledge, no, some of us need healing before we can begin to apply knowledge. I was talking with a friend of a big sister of mine who runs a marriage, sorry, not a marriage, a what do I call it now? A platform, a Christian platform where singles are trained on how to marry right, how to maximize their singlehood well, and also how to pick, marry right in a nutshell. So we're having a conversation one time. Okay, so okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Had a little interruption. So where were we? What was the last word on my lips before? Yes, so my friend, she she began to share with me how there are people who for the past 3 years have been hearing her talk about against premarital sex. And they will still come to her and say, we did it again yesterday. Oh. And she said, okay, congratulations. Like, what do you want me to do? At that point, I just had to laugh and say, many times, go and check their roots. Go and check their childhood. Go and check what happened. It's not that they don't know that premarital sex is not right with God. It's not that you've not resounded how essential it is for one to stay chaste and pure, both bodily and all. It is the fact that they don't have a template, the prototype running, the iOS, their iOS does not support purity. And so if you must infuse purity, you must change the iOS. We have workaholism because you are trying to hide from your own feelings and thoughts. People who do this, if you trace it, something happened. Something happened in their roots. So we are diagnosing what soul pain looks like because remember from the very onset, I began to say you need to appreciate pain. You need to recognize pain so that you can begin to address pain. Some of you you wear it as a garment of pride. Man, I'm so workaholic. I work. I invest all my soul in my work. Or I'm a perfectionist. everything must be perfect before I start. Be calming down. Just calm down and be certain. Go on, evaluate your soul again and find out. Remember, why do I do the things I do? What makes me think that everything has to be perfect before I set sail? See, I used to be in that I'm a perfectionist class. I used to be there. I have some melancholic traits in my temperament. And we know melancholics are naturally perfectionists. Or let me say, yeah, they tend towards perfectionism. But you want to find out, are there any, it's a pain, but is there an injury here? Remember, it is actual, that's potential injury or actual injury that spurs pain. Is there a pain here that is making me act in this way, that makes me not want to show my flaws? There are people, they can't step out of the house without makeup. Have they? It's time to go back and say what makes me. And I'm not talking of people who may have maybe things on their faces. Their faces are perfectly normal, like the average person's face. It doesn't have a lot of spots and wrinkles, but they must be heavily made up because something is telling them on their inside that you cannot be accepted if you show an imperfection. If you check very well, many times, these people had a father or a mother that 90 is a failure. You can't get 90. Are you the person that got first? Does the person have two heads? That parent continually hits against failure, hits against anything that is not perfect, to the point where the child begins to believe that I cannot be accepted if I am not perfect. And so you see them outside, they are always looking sharp, never to be caught on fresh. You think that, oh my God, I love your style. They are hiding. I'm not saying everybody who does it is hiding. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying some of the people who have things to hide, who appear glamorous on the outside, many times they're afraid to show their humanity. They're afraid to show exhibit weakness or show flaw because their wiring has told them from childhood anything less than perfect, anything less than optimal is even a joke. It has to be perfect, is a crime. You will not be accepted, you are not safe. Inability to say no to people, including predators. Someone is consistently using, I don't want to use the word using, someone is consistently destroying you. You have a narcissistic partner. You have a someone who consistently just wants to milk you dry and never appreciates you. Yet you cannot say no. You cannot say no. Because you were made to believe that you don't have a voice, you don't have an opinion. I was in that space where I felt I needed to please people. It has a pleasing thing to it. So I was in that space where I felt, if I say no now, I'll follow this person's hand. If I say no now, this person will feel this way. If I say no, when I learned that that's not God's plan for me. God's plan for me is not to be a yes man. I began to say no with my full chest. In fact, I probably will share it later in the group. Certain things you would see that would encourage you to say no to a thing. You mustn't say yes to everything. So I began to say no. If it's not, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And so now the thing is, I would say it a bit rudely. You say that I don't really want to do this thing and you are stressing me. So what I began to work on is to say very politely with a smile on my face. I say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I won't be able to do that. Okay. But probably you find help somewhere. You should find help somewhere. Lavish spending because you never had enough as a child, very common. Always overachieving because you're still trying to make daddy proud. Daddy never applauded anything you did. Nothing you ever did was good enough for him. And so somehow, sometimes daddy is already dead. Oh. I read the story of a man. I think he was 60 years of age. His father was already late, yet he was still trying to please daddy. Not consciously, not like he was saying, okay, let me see if I can get this deal done so that daddy. No, he may not have consciously been doing that, but something in him keeps telling him, your father is not happy, he's not proud of you, he's not doing this, he's not does not support you. Yeah, you can't be accepted until you get. And so you see them, you admire them. Oh my God, only you have 70 certificates, only you have 500 bachelor's degree, only you is board chairman of 1 million of organizations. What's a great high achiever. And of course, but the person can never stop to revel in those achievements. Why? Because it always feels it's falling short of something. They always critique their work. They do something. You, the outsider, is the outsider in a very logical state of mind, saying, "This is amazing." Then they see an error, say, "No, this is not it. This can never be it. Never, never, never." Why? There is a voice of the parents still telling them, you are not enough. Whatever you do can never be enough. If there's an error, it can never be enough. If someone is doing better than you, you are not enough. You are not accepted. You are not wanted. Which is why parenting is key. Is key. But let's not go to parenting. And I have a lot of other things, always on the defensive, because as a child you felt unprotected. Now, this is my particular case, and so I'm going to just talk about it a little. I always on the defensive. Always on the defensive. I think it was this year or towards the end of last year. Something happened between, I think it was my husband and I or something, and I began to ask myself, why do I live on the defensive? Why do I live like someone is after me and so I have to defend myself? Why do I live as if I'm being attacked? Even when I am not being attacked. Why do I always feel the need to address issues with a touch of violence? Violence is, when I mean violence, I'm not a violent person. I don't even know how to shout. But when I'm talking of violence, I mean a state of the mind. It's just one anger that is just with some things I do. And I have to sit down to ask myself, what's going on here? Why am I living on the defensive? And I had to trace it down. I kept tracing it. It took a while. I think it was just last month I understood why. But at that point in time, that is why soul search is a requirement. It's a key requirement if you will begin to heal. You must do a soul search. I began to ask myself, why do I always live on the defensive? And I traced it, traced it, and guess where it landed me? Guess where it landed me? As a child, there was a point where I had to live with my uncle and his very beautiful and lovely family. I lived with them for 4 years. Was it 4? Yeah, I think 4 years. And much later, I'll show you how to trace it. Okay, I'll show you how to begin to trace it. So I traced it and I came to that point where as a child, I had to live with my uncle for 4 years. My dad had issues with his job and so many other issues. So I and my sister, we had to go stay with my uncle. Very amazing people. I still call him daddy. I call his wife mommy. His children are my siblings. Very, very dear people to my heart. Okay, but that event, my childish brain, very innocent, very gullible, childish brain, began to explain it to me and say, you are not safe. This is not safe. Safety is only with daddy and mommy, which is what every child believes. I don't even think it's just me. So because I'm not with daddy and mommy, I am in the midst of strangers, and strangers are unsafe. When you are with a stranger, you cannot be yourself. When you are with a stranger, you cannot show your emotion. When you are with a stranger, you cannot say no. Stranger equals no safety. That was what my mind, my childish brain computed. And so I realized, let's see what time I have, okay? And so I realized that this ache, although unintentional on both my parents' side and these were a very good family. I went to the same school with their children, so it's not even as if I was being maltreated in any way. Not at all. But my brain, my perception of it was I am not safe. And so when you know how a child would act with their parents, it's I don't know. I've sat down to see people react, or I've sat down to see people act with their parents just to see how things work. If you are with your child, you can tell your child, go and sweep the house, and just I don't want to sweep the house, I don't want to sweep the house. And you might insist the child will sweep the house. But because I had the mindset that stranger equals unsafe, equals bottle it up. You can't express yourself because you are in a stranger's house. And so I couldn't naturally air out my displeasures. So instead, what did I do? I grumbled. I always felt attacked. You tell me to do what I don't want to do, I'm already feeling attacked. They tell me, Esther, go and wash the plate. I don't know what I look like on screen. But, but I'm squeezing my face, I'm running, I'm like, why? Because I didn't feel like I could voice out. I didn't feel like I could say my mind. I didn't feel like I could oppose the motion. Sorry. And so that defensiveness grew with me subconsciously, until I was able to pick it up. Are we still with me? Are we still with me? If you are still with me, let me know. Let me know, let me know, let me know. There are so many ways this soul pain manifests. Sometimes you see these people, they are always quiet because they were always told, shut up, what do you know? What do you know? Shut up. I heard a woman sharing how she couldn't do nice things for herself. You see the way she would buy her baby girl beautiful clothes, make beautiful hair, but she herself would be looking ragged, you'll be looking tattered, raggy, and everything. And it's not because there's no money. She just did not know how to take care of herself because she was brought up to be a slave to others. So many ways, so many ways. And why does it hurt? These are pains. These are pains. Remember, the pains are indication that there is an injury. So I'm writing out the pain. I'm speaking out the pain. I'm pointing you to the pain, not so that you begin to feel self pity, but for you to say, okay, if this is happening to me, that means there was something. There was an injury somewhere. I need to go and excavate. Because whether you like it or not, it is tampering with your life. It's tampering with your belief, with your relationships. It's tampering with your purpose in life. It's tampering with your work and career. It's tampering with everything. And why does this pain hurt so much? It hurts because the cognitive brain was not yet developed to separate events from your identity. Everything that happened to you was an identity for you. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I am not loved. I am not accepted. I am not wanted. I am not skilled. It's you, you, you. It doesn't occur to you that your mother just came from heavy traffic, or that your father just lost his job. Or no, everything is you, you, you. Because the child is selfish. It's a natural wiring. We outgrow the selfishness at the time, but at that point in time as a child, your brain could not understand that. And this is why it hurts. Because somehow been able been you've somehow been able to make an event to form your identity. And that's why the first thing trauma does is to tamper with your sense of identity. And when you want to break trauma, when you want to be free from trauma, the first thing you want to do is to begin to readdress your sense of identity. You are not a martyr. You are not the savior of the world. You cannot, there are so many things that you are not, that trauma has made you believe. It hurts because the brain is constantly taking snapshots of events and storing them for recall. And so, whenever those triggers happen, like for me, whenever I'm with a stranger, I'm not comfortable, I go on the defensive unintentionally. It hurts because the brain would interpret familiar as safe, even though it is not safe, which is what explains why women who had abusive fathers end up with men who are abusive. Maybe just a different kind of abuse. So maybe the father was physically abusive, they end up with a man who is emotionally abusive. You just recycle abuse because if it is not familiar, it is not safe. I heard women say, my man has to beat me. If he's not beating me, he's not a man. Why? Because they've merged beating. They saw their father beat their mother. That was their concept of manhood. They did not like it, but they will repeat it. They did not like it, but they are attracted to it. Yes, it's a bondage. It's a bondage. It hurts. I'm sorry about this. It is a bondage. The brain sees safe, familiar as safe, and will always want to pull you back to that thing that is familiar, even when it is not good for you. And so you keep on sabotaging your relationships. You God will keep bringing good people near around you. Your behavior will keep chasing them away from you, not because you want to do it intentionally. There is a wiring that says you, good relationships should not be found around you, and that is why the pain hurts. The pain hurts because you were made an adult way too early. For some of you, you became an adult way too early before you should have been an adult. There is something they call parentification. Many of us were parentified. I'm telling you the truth. If you had a mother, the, if you have a mother that you grew up with, the chances that you are parentified is high because it's usually mothers that we see it with. Fathers do it too, but usually with mothers. And what is this parentification? Is giving a child the responsibility of meeting an emotional need that the child should not be meeting. And so you see some mothers, they say things like, your father, that's how he always is. You give him eba, he'll say no, it's pounded yam. You're complaining things that your child has no business handling to your child. Why? What are you expecting the child to do with it? Or this way the economy is, we are just the poverty level is just on the increase. I don't even know how God will help us do this thing. Why are you telling your child that? There is a way to communicate that, okay, things are not well, or would thrive with what we have. And it's not by making your child feel responsible for it, because what happens is the child now begins to feel responsible. They're looking for, okay, how can I do this? How can I? You tell them there's no money, there's no money for anything. The way things are, your father did not give me money. The child start hating the father for not giving her money, or start looking for how do we source money. You are parentifying the child, you are damaging the child. You are being made an adult before you should be an adult. You see parents who say, my child is my best friend, I tell my child everything. It's wrong. Your child cannot be your best friend. Go and look for a best friend. You see parents who maybe they lost their husbands early, or their husbands are not, they say, okay, it's just me and my children. It's just me and my children. So only me and my children. Come on, you are ruining these children. I'm sorry, I will dabble into parenting a bit because it's all too intertwined. Childhood trauma happens as a child. If it has happened to you, you need to make sure not to repeat the trauma for your children. It hurts because you have no support system. I'm trying to tell you, remember I said that some things, some traumatic events, some events, not all events are traumatic. And A single episode of an event may not make it traumatic, but when it is repeated, it becomes traumatic. And when we see pain, it means there's an injury. And why does this pain hurt? Why does this injury hurt? Why is this thing hurtful? Many times because you didn't have a support system. There are families broke or poor, maybe because of the economy, because the father is late, because things are not working. Yes, the children grow up so, how do I put it now? They grow up so whole and never associate the need to provide with their identity or any other of that sort of thing. Why? Because they had they had a mother who was wise, who knew not to make the child feel like you are responsible. Life has to come to a grinding halt because you don't have money. It's wisdom. It's a wisdom issue. So you had to support system. Some people who were molested as children couldn't tell their parents, couldn't tell their mother. Why? Because mommy will kill me. Mommy will kill me. And so there is no support system. You can